Welcome back. All right, so the other day I did a video on the West. Now, I thought I had done a video on the East prior to that because I did a video on the Detroit Red Wings and their recent surge back into the conversation when it comes to playoffs and the odds of making said playoffs. But in that video, I had on this side of the board, like, just a little standings thing and going through who was where. And my brain kind of went, all right, you talked about the East playoffs. You talked about it. But I didn't do a video specifically looking at everybody and what the picture is. So here we are. Now, the results on the board here include today's results for the Ottawa Senators as they've already played their game. So the Sens are the number one wild card. 46 games, a record of 24, 18, and 4 for 52 points, 565 points percentage. They're 5, 3, and 2 in their last 10 games. And when you look over the last month, they're 5, 6, and 1 over the last month. So they've definitely got things going. They went through a rough patch prior to this recent good run they've been on. Now, upcoming, they have a game in New York against the Rangers on Tuesday. That, of course, is huge because the Rangers are trying to fight their way back into this, and a win directly against Ottawa would help them with that, right? So Ottawa better bring their A game there. Then they're in Boston on Thursday. Boston's on the board as well, and they're going to be looking for revenge after the loss yesterday. Then they come home, they play against Toronto on Saturday. Those are always fun. And then a week from today on Sunday, they're at home against Utah. So Utah's in the mix in the West. They're not going to be easy either. Then you've got the game at home against Washington on Thursday, the 30th of January, which wraps up their January schedule. And we know Washington is not an easy one to defeat either. And one of the interesting things is, and when I see the power rankings, I always see, well, my team beat this and beat that. Almost all of these teams are playing pretty well right now. So it makes it very difficult to move up the power rankings. It has led me to more than a couple of head scratching moments of, okay, these teams won, they all won, so does this team drop 5 spots because all these teams won? It's just it gets to, and then you pop a couple of Tylenol and you think it over, and then you walk away and you come back and look at it again. There's been more moments of that for me lately with the power rankings than usual. But when you look at Ottawa's chances of making the playoffs, I've got 3 different numbers on the board in terms of percentage. Money pucks in green, Hockey References in blue, and the Athletics in pink. So 68% chance, according to Money Puck, that Ottawa makes the playoffs. 61.8% on Hockey Reference, and 62% on the Athletic. Now, those percentages, I don't think take into account today's game. So those percentages might be a little bit better tomorrow than what they are right there. And it is interesting to see Ottawa just past the halfway mark of the season looking like they're in pretty good shape to make the playoffs if they can keep playing the way they have been, which would be great. I would be very happy to see Ottawa back in the playoffs. Columbus. So nobody gave Columbus a chance before the season started. And not that long ago, they looked like they were kind of done. They're 22, 17, and 7. They have 51 points. 554 points percentage. So in terms of points percentage, both Ottawa and Columbus are the highest numbers on the board. And that's what you want, right? Where you have that leaves it's in your control. If you keep playing this way, you should make the playoffs. So they're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. They're 9-2-2 over the last month, scoring 3.46 goals per game, allowing 2.77 goals against per game. I meant to mention with Ottawa. I'll go back to this. Shane Pinto's been their leading scorer over the last month. 14 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points, which to me reveals that Ottawa's recent run has in large part been defense and goaltending because they don't have anybody who's at a point per game for the last month. And Brady Tkachuk, just 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points in 14 games over that same time period. Now, with Columbus, it is the Zach Werenski show. 13 games, 4 goals, 15 assists, 19 points over the last month. Kent Johnson's been prominent. 13 games, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. You could probably produce it a little bit better. It's tough to find anybody in Columbus that I can go, well, they're clearly struggling. And that's been a part of it. Everybody on this team's bought in. They're playing very well as a team. Now, tomorrow, Monday, they're in New York against the Islanders on Long Island. And then they go to Toronto on Wednesday. So both of these teams that are the wild cards are going to see Toronto over the next 7 days. Then they're in Carolina on Thursday. That's a tough back-to-back. Going from Toronto to Carolina, that's not going to be easy. Then they come home and they play against LA on Saturday. Well, LA's never easy either, whether you're playing them at home or on the road. Then they go to Vegas on Thursday. So they have a few days off and then they're in Vegas. And then on Friday, the 31st of January, they're in Utah. So they go from Vegas to Utah, or, that 24-hour period. It's not an easy schedule upcoming for Columbus, but they've played pretty well. Now, in terms of the odds, none of these sites think that they have a really great chance. 26.8% chance according to Money Puck, 44.6% chance according to Hockey Reference, and a 25% chance according to The Athletic. So this takes into account the schedule and the strength of schedule and just, various computer setups. Everybody's got a different setup. Everybody's got a different, you want to call it an algorithm? Sure, whatever. But basically to simulate what's going to happen, and then we get those numbers. Now, below the playoff line reside the Boston Bruins, and they're in tough. 47 games played, so they've played one more game than both the teams they're chasing. 22-19-6 record, 50 points, 532 points percentage, which is 1 percentage point below Montreal's. They're 3-5-2 in their last 10, and they're 5-6-2 over the last month. Scoring 3 goals per game and allowing 3.23 goals against per game. The goals scored are fine. The goals against need to come down. So tomorrow, Boston's at home against San Jose. That's great. But it's also a matinee game, so matinee games can be sloppy and they can be tough. The good news being, if you're a Boston fan, how many are, hands up, I'm just kidding. But the good news being that Boston has a lot of matinee games, so they should be pretty comfortable playing those, and San Jose does not have anywhere near as many matinee games. And then on Wednesday, they're in New Jersey, followed by Thursday, they're at home against Ottawa, and then they're at home against Colorado on Saturday. That should be a fantastic game. And then they go to Buffalo on Tuesday the 28th, followed by a game at home against Winnipeg on Thursday the 30th. There are some tough opponents on the board here. The game against Ottawa is going to be fantastic after the way that yesterday's game went. And I think the game in New Jersey should have some intensity to it as well. New Jersey's not on the board, but they're not really out of the woods either. The way they've been playing lately, it has definitely been a drop for them. In fact, I'll full disclosure, they've dropped with where they are in the power rankings right now from where they were when I did the power rankings video less than 24 hours ago. They have not looked good lately. So maybe New Jersey ends up on this board the next time I talk about the East and who might or might not make the playoffs. Montreal, 45 games, 22-19-4 record, 48 points, a 533 points percentage, 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, and 10-3-1. 10-3-1 over the last month. Montreal's playing extremely well. If you're not following Montreal daily, it might be easy to not know that's going on. It's also easy to kind of disregard it because they're still below the playoff line by 3 points. But they're only 3 points out of the playoffs, and they got a game in hand on 2 teams they're chasing here. So on both Columbus and Ottawa. So we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of, I did forget to mention for Boston the scoring thing, didn't I? Pastrnak, 13 games, 9 goals, 9 assists, 18 points. Elias Lindholm still not productive enough for them. 13 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points over the last month. Now for Montreal, Hudson has been their leading scorer over the last month. 14 games, 2 goals, 13 assists for 15 points. Brendan Gallagher, just 2 goals in 14 games. I know the offensive seasons are done for Gallagher and have been done for a bit, but it's still interesting to see how little scoring they get. I know he does other things for them, but just pointing it out. So they are at home today against the New York Rangers. So this board is going to change overnight. Then they are at home against Tampa Bay on Tuesday. So they have direct control over their ability to move up. Then they're in Detroit on Thursday. There's Detroit right there. They're home against New Jersey on Saturday. They host Winnipeg on Tuesday the 28th, and then they host Minnesota on Thursday the 30th. There aren't really any easy games for Montreal coming up. This is a tough part of the schedule, but this is a team that's beaten a lot of the top teams in the NHL over the last month, and so they'll look to keep it going. I know what happened against Toronto last night. I kind of look at that and go, I mean, Toronto's a pretty darn good team too, and Montreal just, I think it's an experience thing, and I think it's just playing with the lead is a little bit different than playing in a game where it's either tied or where you're behind and you're trying to fight your way back in. They just seem to be more comfortable fighting their way back in than being ahead, it's odd. I know it's weird, but that just seems to be the case. Philadelphia. So let's move on to the Flyers. 47 games, 21-20-6 record for 48 points. 511 points percentage, 5-3-2 in their last 10, and 7-5-2 over the last month. Now, for scoring, 3.29 goals per game, 2.93 goals against per game, which brings me to Montreal. 3.43 goals per game, 2.57 goals against per game. So, in terms of goals against, I think the best one's Montreal, which Dobesh has helped with. That is tied with Ottawa, which of course Marilinen's helped with, so the young goaltenders there. But on the Philadelphia side of things, it is interesting to see the goals against below 3, since we've talked a lot about how the goaltending hasn't quite been what you want in Philly. But they've done a very good job of shot suppression. Shot suppression is huge in the Philadelphia game. So it's not the prettiest hockey, but Konechny's making it work. He's their leading scorer over the last month, 14 games, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points. Michkov, 14 games, 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. Now, the Philadelphia Flyers host Detroit on Tuesday. Then they go to the Rangers on Thursday. They're at the Islanders on Friday. Then they're at home against New Jersey on Monday the 27th. So this is a very busy week coming up for them. Then they're in New Jersey on Wednesday the 29th, and they host the Islanders on Thursday the 30th. So if you're an Islanders fan, they've got 2 games against Philly coming up. If you can win both those in regulation, if you don't pull yourself into playoff contention, it at the very least would probably pull Philadelphia down. So the Philadelphia Flyers not seen as likely to make the playoffs. And you know what? I'll do the percentages at the end, because at this point I've skipped the percentages enough that I'll do the percentages at the end, and we can discuss, the whole percentage part of things, because the New York Rangers are given pretty good odds, even though they're below the playoff line. 45 games, 22, 20, and 3 record for 47 points. 522 points percentage, so that is a little bit better than Philadelphia's. They have 2 games in hand. They're only 1 point back. Makes sense. The Rangers 6-2-2 in their last 10 and 7-5-2 in the last month. So the same record as Philadelphia for the last month, scoring 2.64 goals per game and allowing 3.14 goals against per game. So for the Rangers, Trocheck's been their leading scorer over the last month. 14 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points. Lafreniere's had his struggles. 14 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. I think this is why, with all the trade speculation that's out there about, JT Miller, the Rangers, and all that, I think this is why Lafreniere's name has started to come up, is because he has had his struggles recently. So you could view it as one contract for another, and that's a whole other debate for another time. But yeah, Lafreniere's had his struggles. So today, the Rangers are in Montreal. Then they host Ottawa on Tuesday. They host Philadelphia on Thursday. So the next 3 games, if the Rangers can keep playing the way they've been playing, and they have points in 7 straight games, we could be talking about a team that has points in 10 straight games and all of a sudden finds themselves, if not above the playoff line, getting much, much closer to it. Then they host Colorado next Sunday. So on the 26th, they're hosting Colorado, and then they host Carolina on Tuesday the 28th. And that's their last game in the month of January. So for the Rangers, I don't think it's as dire now as it was a month ago. We can go that far. Detroit, 45 games, 21-20-4 record for 46 points, so 5 points out of the playoffs. 511 points percentage, the same points percentage as has the Philadelphia Flyers. They're 8-2 in their last 10, so they need to keep not necessarily winning 8 out of every 10, but they need to keep up a pretty strong points percentage to keep themselves in the hunt and to get themselves above that line. Now, they're 8-6 over the last month. The other 4, of course, before Lalonde got fired. They're 8-2 under Todd McClellan. 3.29 goals scored per game, 3.43 goals against per game over the past month. Patrick Kane has really enjoyed a renaissance over the last month. 14 games, 7 goals, 10 assists, 17 points to lead them in scoring over the last month. Compher, 14 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. I'm often surprised Compher doesn't get more points and goals. Just saying. Threw his name on the board for that reason. Now, Detroit's in Dallas today. Then they're in Philadelphia on Tuesday, followed by a game where they host Montreal on Thursday. They host Tampa Bay on Saturday. They'll be looking for revenge from what happened to them last night against Tampa Bay Lightning. They host LA on Monday. Then they're in Edmonton on Thursday the 30th. So they have a couple of days off between the game on the 27th at home against LA and then where they're playing in Edmonton on that following Thursday. The interesting thing to me is that in terms of percentage, the one that has the best chance on everybody's chart is the Ottawa Senators. So now we'll go through the percentages. And I think this just works better to do this at the end. And also because I just forgot to keep doing it. So I'm like, I'll come back to it at the end. So 68% for Ottawa when it comes to money puck. And they like the Rangers, 50.4%, the next highest number, followed by Boston at 30.2%. They give Columbus 26.8%, Montreal 26.3%, Detroit gets 14.1%, and Philadelphia 7.8%. Now, Pittsburgh, Islanders, and Buffalo all have low odds when it comes to making the playoffs as well. And of course, although Pittsburgh did have, I think, 30% on one of the charts, which kind of surprised me that it was that high, to be honest. If Detroit's is 14%, I'm just surprised that Pittsburgh's would be that high. Now, hockey reference, Ottawa gets the highest number again, 61.8%. Second on the list is Columbus at 44.6%. And then the Rangers at 32.9%. Montreal, 31.8%. Boston, 26.7%. Just imagine if I'd said that before the season started. You know what? Boston could fall right out of the playoffs. There would have been a lot of, you guys have said this for years, Boston keeps defying gravity. Eventually, you don't. Every team will eventually miss the playoffs. It's just the way that works. And then you've got Philadelphia at 16.3% and Detroit at 9.4%. I think the numbers will start getting a lot better for Detroit if they win, for instance, today in Dallas and then in Philadelphia. If they win those next two, I would think those percentages would go up by a substantial amount. Now, The Athletic has Ottawa at the best as well at 62%. And then second is the Rangers at 42%, and then Boston at 34%. Columbus at 25%, followed by Montreal at 10%, Philadelphia at 9%, and Detroit at 3%. So I am aware it's almost a half a season we have left. The percentages may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but I think it's fun. I think it's fun to look at what the likelihoods are and the percentages and the odds. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Which of these two teams ends up being above the playoff line at season's end? I think it would be great if it was Columbus and Ottawa, if it stayed that way, because they haven't been in the playoffs in a while, especially Ottawa. I think it'd be great if it was Ottawa and Montreal. I think if every Canadian team made the playoffs, that would be just fantastic. I think it would lead to some great playoffs. But if Montreal's back in the playoffs, and I say this as a Boston fan, it's always enjoyable when Montreal's a good team. Because the Boston-Montreal rivalry, which I've watched since the early 80s, it's always more entertaining when both teams are good. So when Montreal's good and they beat up on Boston because Boston's not, I find it a little less entertaining. But I also don't get a lot of enjoyment out of it if Montreal's just a bad team and Boston beats them up, which has been the case at times over the last 5 years, maybe. They've been good at points over the last 5 years, but just it feels like, it's been a down point for the Montreal Canadiens in terms of their on-ice results, and it would be fun to see them back in the playoffs. I would absolutely love to see another Montreal-Boston playoff series, even though historically that's a bad matchup for Boston, but I would love to see it again. So let me know your thoughts. Who would you like to see above the line, and who do you think ends up there? I don't think anybody should sleep on the Rangers. I think the Rangers absolutely have a team that can do it. They've done it before. It's easy to forget just how good they were during the regular season last year. It just feels like they're playing a lot better right now. So that Rangers-Montreal game later today should be a ton of fun to watch, and it will have an effect on how things are when we look at this picture after. Because if the Rangers won it in regulation, all of a sudden they jump past Philadelphia and Montreal, and that's where people would start paying a little more attention. One thing to keep in mind, if you root for a team that's below the playoff line, or you root for a team that doesn't get as much attention as others, it does get frustrating because people will not be aware of how well your team's playing. They'll be like, they're a bunch of bums. They suck. They're not any good. You'll be like, but we've won 8 out of 10. Against who? Well, they beat Vegas and Tampa and Florida and Carolina. They just, it doesn't count. Those teams just, they all played like probably emergency backup goalies. But there are absolutely going to be a couple of teams make the playoffs in the East this year who maybe weren't picked at the start of the season, which is exciting. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support, as always. I will talk to you again soon.